Hi, my name is Misha Miller, and I am here today to talk to you about 21st century learning and math. Today's objectives are to discuss with you the integration of mathematical practices, Nevada Academic Content Standards or Common Core, the Smarter Balance Assessment, and 21st century learning. We're going to learn lots of ideas for using technology to enhance student learning in the math classroom, but I don't want you to become overwhelmed with too many ideas. So just kind of think about what are the technology resources that you have available to you and which are best suited to your specific student needs. All of our webinars are based on the 6 dimensions of a 21st century learning environment, and those focus on collaboration, knowledge construction, real-world problem solving and innovation, use of technology for learning, self-regulation, and skilled communication. And we'll come back and revisit those later in the webinar. So I took all of the words in the mathematical practice standards and copied and pasted them into a word cloud, into Wordle. And if you're familiar with making word clouds, you know that if the word is repeatedly used, it causes the word to be more pronounced in the word cloud. So it makes sense that we would see the word students used a lot in the practice standards, mathematically, proficient. But there's some other words that stood out to me when I looked at the word cloud as well that made me really think about math instruction. And some of those words were explain, reasoning, understanding, relationships, analyze, arguments, and context. And I think this is where I think 21st century learning and math practice standards are a perfect match. Because it's asking the students to really reason and communicate their understanding about math, to question what classmates are saying, and really think and dig deep in their understanding of the math that they're learning. Smarter Balance assessment items are written towards 4 different claims. They have questions that are written towards concepts and procedures, questions that are written for problem solving, questions that get students to communicate their reasoning, and then also questions that get students to model and to analyze data. I wanted to take a minute to show you a few sample items from the Smarter Balance assessment to really help you to see, now that students are going to be taking this assessment on a computer, how the types of questions can change. And no longer is it paper, pencil, multiple choice, only one correct answer. But for example, with this one, this is still multiple choice, but it's select all that apply. So multiple answers can be correct, and students need to choose all that are. In this example item, notice that students are going to be required to drag from this box different rates or quantities into this calculation to make it true. So there's going to be some manipulating of items on the test. In this example, students are asked to match the graph of the inequality with the written inequality. And notice I have 3 different ones to choose from, and I have lots of different graphs to choose from. So I have a lot of information in one question that students have to sort through. Again, they're manipulating with the technology to match these. So we need to provide those experiences for our students during our instruction. Here is an example of a question type written for Claim 2, problem solving. And again, I want to point out that students are going to be manipulating with the computer. Here, they need to construct or draw a rectangle on the grid using the computer, and then they have to answer some questions around their drawing. Another example for problem solving. This is a high school sample item. Notice in this question, students are going to have to view an animation showing a line and a point above the line and the construction of a parallel line, and then they're going to have to answer some questions about that animation. Here's an example of an item for students to communicate their reasoning from Claim 3. So notice that there's 2 different methods for solving this problem, and the student is asked to identify in which method Pablo made a mistake and what he should do to correct it. And that requires them to explain. And so we need to be discussing more in math. We need to be writing more in math. Another example for communicating reasoning gives the question prompt and then asks the student if Martha is correct, and they have to use mathematics to justify their answer. A sample of modeling and data analysis, which is Claim 4. Students are asked to design a garden. They're going to have to do this using the computer. They need to design it based on this different criteria. Another example for modeling and data analysis, notice that in this sample item there's some pre-work where students have to conduct a survey and get those results before they continue on with the question prompt. So today I'm here to talk to you about how we can use technology to build those or enhance those discussions in the mathematics classroom, to get students to write more in math, which are things that 21st century learning and math practice standards ask us to do, and which they will be assessed on doing on the Smarter Balance assessment. So we're going to start with looking at some websites that help students to construct knowledge. And Tuva Labs is the first one we're going to visit. I like this site because basically this site just goes out and collects data for students to analyze and to question. It allows teachers to make their own activities and post them. So for example, if I'm looking at one of the items, notice that here I have 16 pieces of data that are plotted on this mixed up plot, and I can arrow through and look at the specific data. In this case, it is different breeds of dogs, and it looks at specific attributes of those dogs. But the nice thing is I can come down here and I can manipulate the data, so I can just explore with it. So if I wanted to look at, say, a scatter plot, and I wanted to determine if weight of the dog had any impact on its life expectancy, I could look at that data and see if there's a correlation between the maximum weight and the life expectancy for a dog. So there's different ways that I can manipulate. I can use line graph, I can use dot, and so sometimes there'll be an activity attached to the data that either Tuva Labs has created or that another teacher has created. And so the students can work through that lesson and you can assign it to students. This is a free website, or you can look at, go back to find resources. Notice that you can see the different types of data sets when they're added, what they're focusing on, and notice which ones have an activity and which ones don't have an activity. Very easy to set yourself up as a teacher, and then assign different activities to students. And you can also search for activities or data sets that are tailored to grades 3 through 5, 6 through 8, or 9 through 12. Mathific is a website that has exploration activities for students to help investigate with a math concept and discover how it works, kind of dig deeper into that concept, and notice that I can look at them by grade level, by curriculum, and so I'm just going to scroll down and let's take a look at 6th grade. And how about box plots? So you can get an idea of what one looks like. And so notice this kind of steps me through. What is the median value? You can order the rows if you want. So I can manipulate the rows to help me to find the median, and I'm going to stop there and notice this is where I would put it in, and I'm going to, without doing all my work, guess that it's 15 and enter. Ooh, that was a good guess. And notice that takes me to the next prompt. What is the minimum value? Notice if I put in 28, which is incorrect, it lets me know I'm incorrect. It lets me go back and think about what I went. So good investigations with math concepts that give you immediate feedback. Again, free. Math snacks are animations and games and interactive tools. They're targeted towards the middle school learner and primarily focus on ratios and proportions and scale. They're very engaging, and I really like this bad date one. I've used it with my kids before. It has posted lessons and PDFs that you can print and download that step through students through the activity and the exploration with the math concept. Math Playground has a lot of different ones, and you can search by grade level. They are tied to Common Core standards. Just to model one that I really like, I like this algebra puzzle, and we'll just do a quick easy one so you can get an idea of what it looks like. But here kids are asked to figure out the value of each of the picture icons, and so they have to decide where's a good starting point. And since in this middle row I have 3 of the same, looks like clock, that would help me to know they are all the same value. So I can do 54 divided by 3 to determine what that value is. So once I know that value is 18, I take my little slider and set it to 18. And then I can start looking at the puzzle and see, well, if I know the clock's 18 and I see that there's 2 guitars in this column, I would take my total 20 and subtract 18, and I'd have 2 left over, which I have to split equally. So the guitar is worth 1, and I could look and see now that if I have 2 guitars, I know that's 2, and 2 plus what gets me to 11, and so that should be 9. And if I check here to make sure it works, I have 9 plus 9 is 18, plus 1 is 19, so I'm feeling confident with my answers, and so I can check it and see that I was able to solve it. So I really like Math Playground because it has students construct knowledge by interacting with the game, and it helps them to build understanding and receive immediate feedback. The Lure of the Labyrinth. This is more of an extended game. I know a teacher that used this in their classroom, and they used it over a long period of time because there's different levels and it's a pretty elaborate math investigation. It makes me think more of the games that students play at home. But what's nice about it is that it's correlated to all your Common Core standards. It is targeted towards middle level learners, and so you'll see how some of the different levels and games are connected to proportions and ratios and fractions, and by the different grade levels, so grade 7, grade 6, grade 5, grade 6. So it has all those connections for you. As a teacher, I would encourage you to play first and then see what levels fit into different concepts that you're teaching throughout the year, and then have the kids revisit this game during those times so that they can see those connections. Notice there's lesson plans, and there's individual puzzles that you can teach the puzzle as part of your lesson, and then the kids go back in and explore more with the game. Great way to extend their mathematical learning outside of the classroom in an engaging way. Again, free for teachers and students. Shoulder interactives are very nice, and you can search by audience, so grade level. So maybe if I was searching for grades 3 through 5, and then I can also search by topic if I'm wanting to look at acute or addition or agent modeling. Or I can wait for it just to populate, and I can see all the different interactives. So a spinner to use with probability, angle exploration, bar graph activity, an area exploration activity, arithmetic quiz. So these are great interactives to have students practice their understanding and then construct new understanding with that concept. PhET interactive simulations are both science and math. We're obviously just focusing on the math one. This is one of my favorite ones, graphing lines. So I'm looking at math-specific simulations, and I'm going to run it in HTML5 just to give you a little bit idea. And I'm going to choose slope-intercept 1. And so what's nice is you're able to manipulate the line. You're able to move the points. Notice you can drag up and plot it if you're looking for what is that ordered pair. If I'm just trying to help students to see what are positive slopes and what are negative slopes, notice that as soon as I switch it over, I can see that my slope is now negative. Notice that when it's undefined, maybe I'm really reinforcing with my y equals mx plus b what the y-intercept is. So all I'm doing is manipulating where the line crosses the y-axis, and students can see the only thing that changes in my equation is the value of b, and that is where that line is intersecting with the y-axis. So a nice tool to help build conceptual understanding about slope-intercept form. Illuminations. When I log on to Illuminations, notice that I can search for lessons or interactives. I can search for NCTM standards or by Common Core math standards, and then I can search by grade level. So I already have this set up for interactives specific to Common Core math standards for grades 9 through 12. Notice I have algebra tiles, conic section explorer, which is really nice because you can see that as you manipulate different things, how that visual changes on your cone. So I can come down here and change the height. I can change my slant, and I can manipulate to see, okay, so how does that impact the cone? Desmos. What I really like about Desmos is that students can manipulate to build understanding and construct knowledge, but then there's also some examples that students can use. To help with their understanding. So as I change this, notice that's my what A is equal to. I can manipulate it from the graph, or I can manipulate it from my scrolling value bar. I can see that as I manipulate, how does that change what happens to my graph. And so there's immediate kind of cause and effect relationship to help kids to understand what happens when I manipulate that equation. The National Library of Virtual Manipulatives is also a wonderful site, and you can search again by grade level. So I might choose to do 3-5 this time. And again, I have lots of different interactives and online manipulatives that help students to build their understanding around different math concepts. And then lastly, Annenberg Learner. This time I chose to search for grade levels K2 and by math. And notice that as it comes up, so audiences, if I switch to students, it will refilter and help me to see interactives that students can manipulate and explore with to build their understanding of different concepts. I like this one, building from directions. So these are all websites that students can explore with and manipulate to help them to construct their math knowledge. And they're all free websites. Technology can help students to check their understanding. We saw that with the websites that are available. You may not have access to computers at your school, but maybe you have a class set of iPads. So I wanted to share with you just a few of my favorite math apps. There are just a ton out there that I really like, but these are a few. Most are free. Some are worth paying for, or at least putting on freeappalert.com or one of the other apps that you can use to help them to notify you when the app goes free so that you could use it in your classroom without paying for it. So I'm just going to take a minute to show you my iPad and a couple of these apps. So I'm mirroring my iPad right now, and I'm just going to show you a couple of my favorite ones. We don't really have time to look at all 8, but I wanted to include all 8 in the webinar so you could check them out. Diamath is one of my favorite ones, and under the eye down here in the lower right hand corner, I can change the range of my numbers. So if I'm working with middle school students and I want them to be practicing with integers, I might have my range be -10 to +10. I can determine the number of problems, and then I can determine the difficulty. So easy, medium, or hard. And let's just jump right into hard. Notice too I have instructions, so something to keep in mind. Solve for the bottom number is the sum, and the top number is the product. So when I click done and I start, I'm having to ask myself what two numbers, when I add them, I get 18, but when I multiply them, I get 80. So 10 plus 8 gives me a sum of 18, and 10 times 8 gives me a product of 80. And then I would check, and I know that if I get a green at the top, that means I'm right. And so again, I can look and say what two numbers, when I add them I get 7, but when I multiply them I get -8. And students start to develop a strategy for, is it easier to look at sums first or products first? I know that when I get a product of a negative product, what does that mean that my multiples have to be? And so I know that I have to have one of each. So I might have +8 and a -1 gives me a product of -8, and when I add +8 and -1 gives me a sum of +7. Okay, so that gives you an idea of Diamath. Really great algebra, understanding algebra tool that differentiates for lots of different grade levels based on difficulty. Because if I go back to easy now and click done, notice now I'm not having to look at my factors and my add-ins, but instead I'm just adding my two add-ins, or I'm multiplying my two factors. So it's a great scaffolding tool, and it helps you to differentiate the app based on student needs in your classroom. Number pieces is great for those primary classes to bring out your units and tens and hundreds, and to build understanding, and to construct and deconstruct. Notice I can build or change. I can break down that hundreds into units, or I can break it into rods, or I can keep it as a 100 unit. Math Graph has a lot of nice components like Desmos, which also has an app. Lots of ways for me to build and look at ways to manipulate different graphs. Notice that I also have a quiz me, which helps me to check my understanding based on the ellipse. Really like my script calculator. Notice I can start with 2/3, and then I could go, I don't want just that, but I want to do the square root of 4, no, the square root of 4/16, and I want to put that all over 3, the sine of 3. So I can adjust it and make changes to it. Great tool for students to check their understanding or to check their answer. And I'm going to leave it there and let you explore with some of those other apps. I'm using a reflector app to mirror my iPad onto my computer screen, which is another really nice tool if you are using iPads in your classroom. Technology can help engage students in learning the Nevada Academic Content Standards as well. Glogster EDU is a way for you to make online posters, and you can use them as the teacher. So here's an example of a teacher using it. So they created this interactive poster for systems of equations. In a sense, a way for them to give their students homework in a more engaging way. And so the teacher has posted homework problems. They've included some videos to help students to clarify their understanding of their homework, and also to give examples of different ways or different strategies for solving. Here's another example. So this teacher is using it as a collaborative tool where she has a group of students that are working through this glog, taking notes from the videos and examples, and then they're going to apply their understanding to some practice problems. So a really great way, instead of assigning a worksheet, to assign movie or video for students to watch to clarify their understanding. Maybe go to a website that helps them to manipulate with the concept, and then to apply that with some practice problems. I think really taking it to the next level is getting your kids to use Glogster. So here's a few examples of students who have created glogs. So here's 2 students that have created a glog on rational expressions. So they may have been charged with the task of finding a video that explains how to solve rational expressions. They've put in some tips or things to remember when solving rational expressions. Notice that I can include video, I can include songs, I can include audio, I can upload images. So a really great tool to use in the classroom, both from the teacher perspective and for students to show evidence of their understanding of a concept. Another example of student use and their understanding of probabilities. They had to come up with real-life applications of using probabilities in the world, what their conclusion is. Notice they've included a song, they've included video, so great multimedia tool. to demonstrate understanding of the math concept. Glogster EDU does charge, so if that's something that is enticing to you, I would encourage you to click on pricing and to check out the pricing. You can use Glogster free, but I would encourage you, if you're going to begin using it with your students, that you check into the pricing for Glogster EDU. Technology can help relate math to the real world with multimedia. I think math teachers are very familiar with students asking, when am I ever going to use this? So the more that we can show kids applications to the real world, the better in our math classroom. These are some websites that help you to bring that real world math and problem solving into your classroom. YouTube, I'm sure you all are very familiar with YouTube, but I wanted to show you how, if I'm out, you can get lost on YouTube because there's just so many videos out there. When you find ones that you really like, for example, this is a great real world math application where they have a picture of a student and then they have to find the height of the support pole. So a good visual image to engage students instead of a problem that may be in their textbook. So just a little tweak to that problem in the textbook by making it more visual, using a student from the class. They're doing the same thing, but they're seeing more of a real world application and visual for it. If you find ones that are good that you want to revisit from year to year, I wanted to show you how you can create a playlist on your YouTube channel. So you're signed into YouTube, and now I want to add this video to a playlist. So I already have some playlists, but I don't have any on Trig, so I'm going to create a new playlist, and I'm going to type in Trig, and I want to add this video to my Trig playlist. So I'm going to click Create, and then I wanted to show you that when you're logged into YouTube, you can click on this drop-down menu here and notice that all your playlists now then are saved. And so, for example, if I wanted to go to my geometry playlist, I could click on that and it shows geometry videos that I've found before and used with my students that I like to be able to go back and revisit, and I can easily find at a later date instead of trying to search for it again. So nice YouTube tip when you find resources on YouTube that you want to reuse at a later date. Holly Young is someone that I used to work with in the district, and when I was in the classroom, she had an annual contest that was a photo and math problem contest, and students would take pictures out in the world that would inspire them to write a math problem. And so I really kind of took that and ran with it and would include that in my math instruction every year. It would be a quarter project that students would do. And I think that kind of helps students to be more aware of things that are happening out in the world and how math applies to it. They're having to make those connections as well. Learnzillion is a resource. They have a lot of free resources. There is also a premium package that you can purchase, but there's a lot of really great stuff just with the free resources. And notice that these resources are written to different grade levels. So I'm going to click on second grade, and then notice in my table of contents I can choose operations in algebraic thinking, or geometry, or number and operations in base 10. So I'm going to choose operations in algebraic thinking. And then notice I have individual lessons here. Add within 20 by decomposing to make 10. Notice it's tied to the Common Core State Standard, and it's tied to math practices. So I'm going to click on that. And as I scroll down, you can see that there's teacher handout, there's present to classroom in full screen mode. Here's the core lesson where I'm going to launch my task. Notice I have teacher notes, I have possible guiding questions. If I keep scrolling down, I have those for each of my tasks. I have a task debrief with teacher notes and possible guiding questions. Get back to the big idea of this lesson and teacher notes, and then also a closing. So if I keep scrolling down, I have assessment. I have an associated video lesson. I have practice exercises, 3 different sets of practice exercises. So they're really powerful, meaningful lessons that teachers have collaborated on. If you're part of the dream team for Learnzillion, and it's really nice that they have all of these to share with you, not only to help your students clarify their understanding of the standard, but also just yourself as the teacher, as we're all adjusting to what the Common Core standards are really asking students to learn. Robert Kaplinsky. This website has a collection of real-world problem-solving prompts for students. Notice I can search from 2nd grade through high school. And so I'll just click on this very first one. How many biscuits can you make? And notice it presents a situation for your students, presents them with a challenge. How many biscuits can you make using the available ingredients? Gives you some questions to ask, things to consider, gives you a picture of all of the ingredients and the directions, gives you some videos, connects it to your content standards, and there are just a ton of these. So when I go to lessons again and say I want to search for something that's suited to 8th grade, how do skyscrapers write messages, how much shorter are staggered pipe stacks, how much does a 100 by 100 In-N-Out cheeseburger cost? So some are just really engaging, much more engaging than that problem in the textbook probably or on the worksheet. So just a different way to get kids engaged and excited about math, and for them to see the applications of using math in the real world. Get the Math is targeted towards middle school students, and they have different challenges that connect math to careers, math and fashion, math and music, math and video games. If I go right to the Teachers tab, it shows me how I can use these lessons with my students in my classroom. I can go and get math and video games, the lesson plan itself. I can download all the full handouts that go with the video and with the activity, and then I have my learning objectives already written up for me. So great resource. Mathlicious. Mathlicious is a website that gives you real world applications for different standards. Let's go back to just lessons. I can search by Common Core grades or topics. This is targeted more towards middle school and high school, so secondary. But grade 7, I can select topic, say geometry. I can select a standard within that and then filter. They have free lessons, but they do have an upgrade cost as well. They are very conscious of teachers and their limited income, so they have a pay what you can option if this is something that you see yourself using in your math classroom. Here's an example of an activity. How accurate are police speed guns? They really try to engage students. I find that a lot of their lessons are questions that students ask, that students are wondering about, and then they build the math into that inquisitiveness. Notice it has your objectives for your student, it ties your content standards. They have downloads, the student handout, the lesson guide before you begin. And then here are some related lessons. So say you're working on that and the students are beginning to understand that concept, but they need a little bit more practice with it or to look at it from a different application. Here's some related lessons that may target those same standards. So I encourage you to check out Mathlicious. STEM Collaborative is a free site that targets middle school students and applications of scale and proportions and ratios through 4 different investigations. Math by Design, where they're designing a park. Scale City, Rock and Roll Road Trip, and Proportion Land. And those are free investigations for your students. And then Yummy Math. Yummy Math, you can search by grade level again. So I have 3rd through high school. And it's just a collection of prompts and questions that focus on real-world applications. For example, here's one: do teams that spend a lot win a lot? So first ask students to look at the table. What do you notice? What does it make you wonder? And then dive down into the activity. So great application for your data analysis Common Core standards, where kids are having to analyze data. This specific prompt, if I hop back down to maybe a 4th grade, and let's say number and operations with fractions. Let's see what comes up. Someone ate my cake. Have to read more about that. So in this fraction operation and representation activity, students are asked to decide how much of the cake was eaten using fraction multiplication or angle measurement, if that's what you need from this activity. They find out how much someone owes me for what they ate. So notice that they have a technology connection here using the Interactive Fraction Model app from NCTM. There's a PDF attached to it. It connects to your Common Core standards, and then also students can, or teachers can, comment on the prompt. So these are all really great websites that help students to relate math to the real world and really focus on that problem solving, helping students to be tenacious, to be inquisitive, to be engaged with learning math. Technology can also help students to communicate their understanding. And I think this is really key in the math classroom, is helping students to communicate their understanding, to discuss it, to write about it. And as a teacher, it helps us to truly see where students are in their math understanding, as opposed to just grading a worksheet or homework that's basically just calculations. Here's an example of using blogging in an elementary classroom using kid blogs. This is Miss Carr's blog, and she uses the blog for all of her course subjects, but here's an example of a math blog prompt that she has posted for her students to respond to. And she's asking them to share different math strategies for solving addition or subtraction problems. And then her students are commenting to that blog prompt with strategies they use to break the numbers apart or decompose, add on or compose. You could use a number line, and then notice Miss Carr is in here asking for clarification from Mila. So students here using Miss Carr's blog, they are responding to her blog prompt. Notice that all students can look. So if I were responding to this and I had a strategy, and then I started reading about Caitlin's strategy or Kira's strategy, I'm going to start to add to my strategy bank, because I'm not only learning from the teacher, but I'm learning from my classmates as well. And I'm writing for an authentic audience. I'm not just writing for my teacher, but I'm writing for my classmates too. Here's an example of a blog in secondary at the middle school level. And this teacher had a class blog, but then the students had their individual blogs, and it was a problem-solving blog. So the teacher would present students with a prompt, and then students would respond to that prompt in their own blog. So here's the blog. Notice the teacher had different blog prompts, and they got some of their ideas from Barry Lane's 51 Wacky Research Reports, which if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to check it out. Helps students to write about their math understanding in a creative, more engaging way. This teacher used photo-inspired math problems quite a bit as blog prompts, and also created podcasts, video podcasts, introducing a problem in real life for students to solve. So here's an example of one based on the 2006 World Series. So brought in photos from that experience, and then prompted the students with some data, and then a question for students to practice their math using real world data in a real world scenario. So this blog was all about problem solving and presenting the students with problems to solve, and then students would go to their individual blogs and they would respond to that problem-solving prompt on their own blog. And so students were required to write about their process for solving. They were required to talk about how they know their answer is reasonable. And it was more about the process than it was the right answer. So really getting kids to focus on those math practices. Google Docs, if you're a Google Docs user, a way for you to use Google Docs in your math classroom. If any of you math teachers are familiar with the Important Book, the Important Book takes a concept and dives down into explaining about that concept and then reiterates that first sentence again. So the important thing about adding integers is eliminating zero pairs. It goes into why or how to eliminate zero pairs when adding integers, and then your concluding sentence. But the important thing about adding integers is eliminating the zero pairs. So there's kind of a format to explaining about that concept. How cool would it be for students to collaborate on this important book with each student doing a different slide as part of that book? And if you're familiar with Google Apps, you know that one of the best things about Google Apps is they're collaborative, and we can have multiple people in the same document, or in this case, presentation, working on it at the same time. If you are interested in finding more out about Google Slides or presentations, I would encourage you to check out one of our other camps on Google Docs and Slides presentations. Edmodo. Edmodo is like Facebook for education. It looks very similar to it. This is a screenshot of a teacher's Edmodo page, and the way the teacher was describing this for me is that she would prompt the students with some math problems to solve on her Edmodo page, and then students would reply to those prompts, and the students just kind of took it and ran with it, and then she started having students write their own math problems and asking other students in the classroom to solve them and reply to them. And then you'll see that this student is revisiting the replies and making clarifications and saying, yes, you're right, or correcting students as they solve. So that's Edmodo. We also have a camp session on Edmodo. So if you want to find out more about using Edmodo in your classroom, I would encourage you to check out the Edmodo camp session. Padlet is one of my favorite tools. Basically, it's an online bulletin board that allows you to ask or prompt students, and then they can post sticky notes on this wall. And so my prompt was, you write the problem, the answer is 9. Write an expression that when you use order of operations to simplify it, the answer is 9. So you could expand on that and say you have to use at least 4 different operations. So there's lots of different ways that you can change this. But what I like about the wall and the questioning that you can use for the wall is it's very open, differentiated, very accessible to all students. And they're going to learn from each other. So instead of giving a worksheet that has 20 problems on it, you can ask them to come up with their own expression, and then say you tell the class that you've planted a couple students or colluded with a couple students to have incorrect expressions posted on the wall. and they have to find them. So instead of doing 20 problems on a worksheet, they're doing 20 problems on the wall, checking to see if they can find the one that's incorrect. So kind of a sneaky way to get them to practice math in a more engaging way. And notice, if you can see, I have some, because I'm signed in, where I have to approve it or I can remove it. So this is just a person's name. So I always required the students to put their first name only, or first name and period, if I had them in first period or third period. And then I would approve it so that you could see it on the wall. So the ones that have this remove or approve, if you were to visit the wall, you wouldn't see those until I approve them. So that's a nice kind of thing about Padlet, is that you can moderate the posts on the wall as a teacher. And this is another free tool. So if I wanted to remove it, I could just click remove, OK to remove, and it's gone. If I wanted to approve this one, I click approve, and now you can see it. But notice I can still go back and I can edit, or I can trash. Now I can do that because I'm the teacher and I've created this wall. Students wouldn't be able to edit or change any of their classmates' responses once they're posted on the wall. That's Padlet.com, and that's a free site. Another example of Padlet, you can also post files or link to an internet site or post photos. So here's an example of polygons in the world. Find a polygon out in the world, take a picture and post it to our wall. Don't forget to identify your polygon by name. Comics, using comics in math is a great way for students to see other applications or for explaining their understanding of a concept. For example, here's one on shapes and sizes that students have created. And notice with Pixton for Schools, which is just one comic Web 2.0 tool out there, you can embed a rubric. Here you have students showing their understanding of same shape, different size. I'll let you read that. Okay, so one way for students to show evidence of their understanding of proportionality. They get to create the characters in the comic. They get to write what those characters say. So just a fun, creative way for students to demonstrate their understanding of the math concept. Voki is an online talking avatar creator. So here's an example of a way to apply it in the math classroom and have students create them to show evidence of their understanding or to explain in a fun way.
I multiplied 15 and 23 and got a product of 345. I know that my answer is correct because I rewrote my problem using distributive property and solved it again. I got the same answer of 345. When using the distributive property, I rewrote 15 times 23 to 15 times 20 plus 15 times 3, and 300 plus 45 equals 345.
So if I click on Get a Voki now, you can see what the website looks like. You can create them. You can build your own avatar and shirt and hair and eye color. And you can give it a voice that you want. You can change the background. And then more importantly, you can type in what you want your avatar to say And in this case, or this example, it was sharing how they knew their answer was reasonable. Educreations is a web app, and it also is an iPad app, and it allows you to create videos, either teachers explaining how to solve a math equation or a trig equation, or just a lesson on a specific math concept. You'll see lots of examples of teachers using it. I really like when the students are using it to help demonstrate their understanding. And so here's an example of a group of students that created an educreation. And I'm just going to kind of scroll through it for time's sake, so you can see how their whiteboard screen changes as they're explaining their understanding of this concept with examples. They are also talking through it, so there's audio attached to this. So they're verbally explaining what they did as they also show you examples and a visual. And that is Educreations. And that is a free whiteboard app for students and teachers. During a few of the communication tools, I talked about some books that are great resources that I would highly recommend for math teachers to incorporate writing in the classroom in an engaging way. When we looked at the EduBlogs, there was an example prompt from Wacky We Search Reports by Barry Lane. Also for the Padlet prompts that are open-ended, such as the solution is 9, you write the problem. There's a lot of really great differentiated open math prompts in good questions, great ways to differentiate mathematics. This is for K8, I believe. And then there's also one, more good questions for secondary mathematics to differentiate. And that one is 612. So I would highly encourage you to check those out. I'll provide a link to this slideshow so that you can click on these books and they'll take you right to Amazon, so you could check those out. So why do you want to bring 21st century learning into your math classroom? Hopefully I've given you lots of good reasons throughout this webinar, but to recap a little bit, it's a great way for you as a teacher to dive down into your student understandings more. When they're explaining, when they're writing, when they're discussing, it helps you as a teacher to see exactly what they understand and where their misconceptions are. So students are able to communicate that using these tools, which is a 21st century learning, skilled communication. It also is something that math practice standards are asking us to do in the math classroom. A lot of these websites or Web 2.0 tools allow you to differentiate the learning in your math classroom. Using this technology helps align perfectly with what math practice standards are asking you to do. It's very student-centered, the problem solving. It allows you for them to work individually or in groups. There were lots of tools and websites I showed you that help make math relevant to students. There's lots of problem solving that you don't have to create, but it's already out there on the web for you to use as a resource in your classroom. And it's really helping the students to use technology for learning, not just the teacher using the technology, but students are manipulating on those websites. Students are using Web 2.0 comics to create comics to share their understanding. Students are creating online posters if they're using Glogster EDU. So students are using the technology. I told you earlier in the webinar that we would come back and revisit some of the dimensions of 21st century learning, and I wanted to highlight the ones that are best fit for the resources that I shared with you today. And those dimensions are real world problem solving and innovation, skilled communication for the students, student use of technology for learning, and students building their own knowledge. Washoe County School District does not have a current policy to support teachers using these tools in the classroom. So I would encourage you to make sure that you are familiar with the relevant laws when you're asking students to create accounts online, or if you are posting student work online. You should consult with your site administrator and then also seek written permission from your parents to use the Web 2.0 tools or the websites in, well, specifically the web tools that ask students to log in or ask them to post work online. You can get lots of ideas from our Pinterest boards, which are a collection of all of our camp sessions. So we dare you to check it out. If you want to learn more about being a 21st century educator, you can visit our website, follow us on Twitter, and again, check out our Pinterest board. I thank you for joining me today. Here's my contact information and also a link to the Google slide presentation where you can click on all the links to explore more.